Got that extra hour, feeling good. I got some Red Bulls in me. Let's do this. We just saw the announcement about United coming up and baptism. I do just want to reiterate that if you have not been baptized as a conscious being, meaning not a baby, maybe you're an older child or as an adult, I would love for you to be open to getting baptized at this coming up United. And if you wanted to be baptized, best thing to do is on the Connect card that Pastor Chris just mentioned, on the back there's a place to check off baptism. So if you want to be baptized and just follow through in the committing and the calling of Christ on your life, check that off, and we would love to give you more information about that. But today we are starting this new series, Above the Noise. 4 months of Ephesians is over. We're moving into our fall. Oh, you're excited about that? 4 was a lot. I get it. And we want to talk about above the noise. I know you know this, but there has never been a time in human history where the human brain is more distracted than it is right now, right? And that's primarily because of technology. Technology is, without question, the number one reason why we are so distracted. I'm convinced now that, and this may be a stretch, but the worst thing to ever happen for humanity happened on June 29th, 2007. Do you know what happened on June 29th, 2007? The first iPhone came out. Oh, it's all been downhill since then. Now listen, I have one, all right, but I do wish an EMP would go off and no technology would exist anymore. We're so distracted. Let me just give you some stats. Smartphones, on average in America, take up 4 hours and 37 minutes of the American life. 4 hours and 37 minutes. That includes things like social media. That's 2 hours and 23 minutes. Watching television or streaming media, 3 hours and 6 minutes per day. Frequent device checks and interruptions. This is just like your watch going off or your phone going off and you're just checking it. I saw different stats on here from 144 times a day to 205 times a day on average. That means in this message alone, you are going to check your phone probably 10 to 15 times. Online news cycles, 24/7 global coverage of the crisis and fears and controversies. We have digital ads and algorithms. I mean, social media has a personalized noise to get your attention, to keep you even more hooked to the crack that is social media. Emails and work message apps. I mean, I have 6 different email accounts. I have Slack for what we do here with our staff. I have Microsoft Teams for what I do with my church planting deal. I got GroupMe. Then the DMs from Facebook and Instagram. Hey, can you guys do me a favor? I know Pastor Appreciation is over, but can you give me 1 month of not letting me know anything? Just keep me in the dark for 1 month. That would be a beautiful thing. We got podcasts and YouTube, and then you just have the general background noise everywhere you go, right? There's always noise pumping everywhere. Like, how many different ways can they do Coldplay, right? I don't need to hear Imagine Dragons in some kind of weird jazz version. Noise is everywhere. And as a result, our attention span is shortened. I was looking for a better stat than this, but the only thing I could find is that we went from 2.5 minutes on a single task, our focus, 2.5 minutes in 2004, to now 45 seconds today. So 2.5 to 45 seconds. So the average attention span right now, because of the way that our brains have been rewired because of technology and all the interruptions, is only 45 seconds on one given task. If you have been focused on me this whole time now, you're 4 minutes in, I'm so proud of you. Good job. 4 minutes of focus, that's incredible. Good job. We've become addicted to the digital dopamine hits. I mean, we literally get dopamine hits all the time when we get another like or another interaction or another thing that we want to see. We've lost the ability to be bored. Boredom's actually a blessing. Do you know how much creativity comes out of boredom? Boredom's actually a necessity for the human mind to slow down and to get a breather and to start to get creative. Without boredom, there's a lack of creativity. I mean, when we were younger and you would drive anywhere, you didn't have a device in your hands to occupy you. You had to literally just look out the window and watch nothing. My family has a game that we play. It's called Roadkill or Tire. And you're just looking. What is it? I don't know. just something else to do. I mean, when was the last time a kid was in a doctor's office waiting and they didn't have a device in their hand? Now, when we grew up, we had 2-year-old magazines that no one wanted to read, that were covered in like snot and drip and drool. Like the worst thing to ever do in a doctor's office would be to touch the very magazine, which was your only source of entertainment. You had no other choice but to get sicker while you were there in your boredom. Our memory and deep thinking has declined. We're overstimulated, we're under-rested, and the list goes on and on and on. And as a result of all of this, we have lost the ability to have an ongoing, clear connection to God. It's the worst outcome of the digital age and the noise in which we live in. We've lost the ability to have an ongoing, clear connection to God. Jesus says in John 10:27, "My sheep listen to my voice. I know them, and they follow me." I don't think most of us are hearing the voice of God with any level of regularity. And as a result, we're walking around lost and anxious and confused because we're not hearing the calming, assuring voice of Jesus in our life. How can we, with all this other noise and digital noise and stress of life noise and everything else that is happening? Which is why we must learn to get above the noise and rediscover what it means to slow down, to listen, and to live in connection to Jesus. Not just on Sunday, but every day, consistently, regularly. And so we're going to spend the rest of this month learning tools and practices to make sure that we're going above the noise and we're staying connected to Jesus. And to start the series, I'm going to look at one of the most famous dinner parties in all of the Bible. We don't have dinner parties anymore. That's another thing we've lost, right? CenterPoint Church, let's get back to dinner parties. Invite 6, 8, 10 people over next weekend, cook some food, hang out. You know what? Just come to my house. Next Friday, all of you are invited to the McMillan house to have a dinner party. But let's jump in. Luke chapter 10, we're going to start at verse 38. Man, that extra hour, you feel it right now, don't you? How many of you would never have been at this service if you had not gotten an extra hour? Because there's a lot more than normally here at a 9 a.m., I'll tell you. I don't think my announcement last week of going to the 9 or 12 was that effective, okay? Luke chapter 10, starting in verse 38. This is what Luke writes. He says, "As Jesus and the disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary, who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to him and asked, 'Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me.' 'Martha, Martha,' the Lord answered, 'you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her.'" Let's get a little into the understanding of this text. First, I want you to remember that wherever Jesus went, Jesus had an entourage. Jesus always had a crew. He had always had a posse with him. I mean, of course, he at least had the 12 disciples that were with him, but a lot of times he had more disciples than simply the 12. And now they're coming over and they're stopping by Martha's house, and they're going to have this dinner party with Martha. And I think sometimes we forget this point, especially at this aspect of Jesus' ministry. Jesus is a celebrity. He's a celebrity at this point. Like he is known. Everyone knows about him. There's rumors about him. People are talking about him. There's people gossiping about him. Like, Jesus is a legit celebrity. He is beyond insta-famous. He's like real famous. And now Jesus is coming to eat at your house. He's coming to eat at the house of Martha and Mary. And you have these two single sisters. We don't know Martha's deal. A lot of people assume that she was probably married at one point, or her husband died, or something happened. None of that matters. We just know that they're not married now. And they have this famous teacher, this famous rabbi that everyone is talking about coming to visit them. And one way or another, they already heard some teachings. They already believed that Jesus is significant. I don't know if they would have realized that he is the Messiah yet, but they're all in under this rabbi's teaching. Can you imagine if Taylor Swift or Aaron Judge was coming over to your house for dinner? I want you to think, what would you do? You have someone famous coming over to your house with their entourage to hang and have a dinner party at your house. What are you going to do? If Jesus was coming over to my house, I got to tell you, Sarah, my wife, wouldn't be like, oh, it's fine as it is. There's no way that would happen. Now, my wife would want to make sure that everything is perfect in our house. I mean, she would be so on top of it. She would start cleaning things that have never been cleaned before. She would start cleaning under sofas and on top of frames of pictures. She would be going out of her way to make sure everything was neat. And then when Jesus was coming, she's like, oh, we gotta pull out the china. For our younger people, you don't get china anymore. My generation, I think, was the last generation that did china, right? When you got married at my generation, it was like, oh, you gotta still get china. And then after we did, we're like, why? We don't have dinner parties anymore. You don't need the china. You know, get me something else. But she would get out the wedding china that we got, so that we use one time a decade. And she'd put it out and get that all prepared. And now some of you are thinking, well, why aren't you helping Brian? I get it. It's not because I'm sexist. She's just that much better than me. All right? Yes. I just let her do what she's so gifted at. And I do what I'm gifted at, which I don't know what that is. I'll be entertaining Jesus. Like, hey, Jesus, what do you think? Shouldn't have had that extra Red Bull. I apologize. But you think about it. If someone was coming to the house, you would make sure, a celebrity, a famous person, you're going to go out of your way to make sure that everything is as perfect as possible. That's what Martha's doing. And so you might read this story and think, all right, this doesn't seem to make sense. Like Martha's doing what I think anyone would be doing. Why does it go the way that it does? Well, let's look at it verse by verse. Let's make sure we understand what's happening, what Jesus is ultimately getting at then as well. Start back again at verse 38. It says, as Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. Now, Martha is the older sister. I think that's important. It's Martha's house, not Mary's house. This is Martha's house. She's in charge. Verse 39. She had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. Now, you hear that, and you're like, okay, what's the big deal? But we have to understand, 2,000 years ago, Jewish culture in Rome, this was a very big deal. This was a huge cultural faux pas. See, there was clear defined roles for men and for women. Even in the house, there was gender segregation, where it was the expectation that the women would be in the kitchen, would be preparing, and that they would not be disturbing the men and the man talk, the conversations of the men that were happening in the other room. That was completely the expectation. And to break that would have created a level of shock and awe. And on top of that, Mary's just not in the room behind a couple of the disciples with her ear open, just trying to listen. No, Mary's up in it. She is right there at the feet of Jesus. And what's so scandalous about that is at the feet isn't necessarily this, this position of like it's weird for a woman to be there. Well, it is, but the reason it was so weird is because at the feet of Jesus, the rabbi is the position of a disciple. That's where someone that was a disciple of this master, of this rabbi, would sit to be closest to him, to hear and to learn everything that he was teaching. And she's there at the feet like a disciple of Jesus. And I think this is just teaching us something so important, that Jesus is actually letting her sit at his feet. Jesus isn't like Mary, whoa, what are you doing? Yo, woman. That's a man's spot. That's not for you. how can you be here? No, we don't see that at all. Actually, Jesus doesn't push her away in the slightest. And by his actions, he is actually saying to Mary, get this, you are one of my disciples. You are just as important. You have just as much right to be at my feet as any of these other men in this room. Mary, a woman, is a disciple of Jesus. Paul builds us on this idea in Galatians chapter 3, verse 28, when he says that before God there is neither Jew nor Gentile, neither slave nor free, nor is there male and female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus. The spiritual equality that Christ brings to us. This was beyond revolutionary for the time. And Jesus is saying, no, you are one of my disciples. What's also funny is that there's no indication that the other male disciples are mad about this. Now, someone might have been frustrated, someone might have been annoyed, but there's no indication of anyone having any issues with this except one person. Verse 40. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. Martha is focused on work. She's focused on the task at hand. She's getting everything ready. After all, Jesus needs to eat, doesn't he? Like he walked all the way here. There was no Uber. Jesus is hungry. The disciples are hungry. This celebrity rabbi is here. We need to get ready for him. And again, it's Martha's house, which means if this dinner party goes poorly, it reflects on her, not Mary. It's Martha's reputation that's at hand here. And so she's doing what she needs to do. And so Martha looks in and she sees her sister Mary sitting at the feet of Jesus. I can only imagine Martha's thoughts in this moment. Oh, no, she didn't. I asked her 30 minutes ago to peel the potatoes. What is she doing right now? She's there at the feet of Jesus like a disciple, not in my house. Huh. Do we have any women in the room that have sisters? For real, how many women in the room have sisters? Let me ask you another question. In every sister relationship, probably something to do with age, not always, but often older and younger. One of the sisters tends to be a little bit more of the hardworking sister, a little bit more responsible, where the other sister is a little bit more of the hippie, the party girl. I'm not judging. I'm just talking facts here. That's all I'm doing. And so let's get into some real trouble. Raise your hand if you're the Martha sister. Raise your hand if you're the responsible sister. Come on now. Yeah, some of you raised it proud. That's right. You're like, I am responsible. That's right. How mad are you right now at Mary in this story? Come on, Martha. It's like you hear this and you're like, I lived that nonsense every day as a child. I get where Martha is coming from right now. So Martha's ticked. She needs a little help from Jesus on this one. And so she looks at Jesus and she says, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me. I love the sister moment. She's telling on her sister. Snitches get stitches every time. We know that. We know that. Yet Martha's plan backfired. She was hoping that Jesus would take her side and rebuke Mary. Martha thought that her actions were what was most important and most impressive to Jesus. She is being the good hostess. She's taking care of things. She's preparing the food. She's working. She's serving. She's doing what needs to be done. And what's Jesus' response in verse 41? Martha, Martha, the Lord answered, you are worried and upset about many things. What Martha thought Jesus wanted was actually distracting her from what Jesus would ultimately want, what he really wants. Martha thought that this time was about food, but it was really about spending time with Jesus himself. Jesus was the priority. Think about this. Jesus, the Prince of Peace, is in her home, and she's worried and upset. Seems like a little bit of a contradiction there, doesn't it? And then Jesus finishes by saying this in 42. He says, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her. He does say better. He doesn't say the only thing important. He says, no, she's chosen the better thing. See, here's what we have to understand. Connecting to Jesus is the most important thing that we can do. Amen? Connecting to Jesus is the most important thing that we can do. In this moment, listening to Jesus was the most important thing happening in that house, not the casserole. Jesus was the most important thing. He was the priority. And not just him, but the relationship to him, the words coming from him, the connection to Christ. And the truth is, if we get this right, all the other stuff ultimately falls into place. Matthew 6:33, Jesus teaches, but seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given as well. Jesus is saying, no, here's where it has to start. The primary focus of your life, where you're putting your time, where you're putting your attention, has to start first and foremost about the priorities of the kingdom of God and the King himself. That's where it needs to start. Now let me bring a little clarity here. Because sometimes I think these verses are taught to create a false dichotomy of being contemplative versus active, right? Just sitting at the feet of Jesus 24/7 versus getting work done that needs to get done. And that's not the point that Jesus is making. This story isn't about pitting serving against sitting. Jesus isn't anti-work, he's anti-worry. He's not rebuking being active. He's just trying to restore proper priorities in our life when it comes to him. Of course, there are many times that you need to be serving and acting. But there are also times that you need to stop running around and sit at the feet of Jesus. Stop being so busy. Stop letting the noise drown out the opportunity in our life to hear Christ, which is the ultimate thing that we can be doing. This was a moment where the very real and physical Jesus was in the room too. Don't forget that. They're not just praying. Like, Jesus was physically present with them. He's teaching. And Mary sees this opportunity with Christ in the room, and she's like, I am not passing up the opportunity to hear directly from Jesus. No rumors, no gossip, no, I'm going right to the source. He's in my house. I want to hear his words. Not to mention Martha is the one who even brought it up. It's not like Jesus was yelling at Martha, Martha, stop. Just come in here and sit down. No, Martha's the one who's like, hey, Jesus, yell at my sister. How dare she just be at your feet listening to you? And Jesus says to her, no. I'm not going to stop Mary's desire to be with me, to connect with me, to hear from me. She's like, I'm not going to break that up because that is the most important thing anyone can ever be doing. So Jesus wasn't randomly rebuking Martha. Martha brought it on herself. See, these verses aren't saying don't serve, don't work, don't help out in kids' ministry on a Sunday. It's not saying just take in Jesus, do nothing else. That is not the point. But what we learn here is when Jesus is speaking, in that moment, there is nothing more important going on. And we need to hear from him. We need that relationship with him. And again, how to do that, next week we'll start talking about the spiritual formation and disciplines that we need to do as Christians to get above the noise and to hear Christ, but we need to start setting the priority week one first and foremost, that hearing from Jesus is the greatest priority within the life of a believer. We need to hear him. And Jesus is speaking. Martha is distracted. She's worried and upset. She isn't paying attention to him. Friends, there is too much noise in our head and too much to do and too many distractions. And she is missing his voice and his teaching. She is missing engaging with him. Who else relates to that? With our 30-second attention span. Who feels that same way? And so whether our distraction is busyness or technology or kids' sports or even serving in other aspects of ministry, if we are not seeking and connecting to Jesus, then we are not doing what we are called to do as followers of Jesus Christ. Let me reread John 10:27. My sheep listen to my voice. I know them and they follow me. Do you hear the voice of Jesus in your life? Is his voice the most important voice? Is his voice the voice that you're following above your voice, above your family's voice, above culture's voice, above other voices in social media and news and everyone else trying to get your attention? Hear me, are you following the voice of Jesus? You see, to sit at someone's feet was the posture of a disciple training to be a rabbi. Not a fan, not a helper, but a student. That's what we all need to be with Jesus. Do you know the voice of Jesus? Because that's what being a disciple of Jesus is. You know his voice, you hear his call, and you follow him. And so if we're not following him, we're not a disciple of him. So that's what being a Christian is. Being a Christian isn't the religious acts of Christianity. Being a Christian means that you are a follower of Jesus. That what he teaches, what he says, is what directs our path. And it's his voice that we follow. And so let's get above the noise and hear Jesus. Above the noise we find peace. Above the noise we find direction. Above the noise we find Jesus. Amen.